A billionaire single father discovers that his son is going to lose his sight, until a poor girl says, "I know how to cure him," and what happens is unbelievable. Richard Maves straightened his expensive tie and checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. He was a man who lived by the clock. Every second counted when you were the most in-demand lawyer in town. "Mr. Maves," his secretary said through the slightly open door, "Judge Peterson called. He said you were right about the Wilson case." Richard nodded without lifting his eyes from the documents. Another victory to add to his flawless record. In 10 years, he had never lost an important case. "Laura, remind me to call Ethan's school. I need to confirm the meeting with his teacher. It's already on your schedule for tomorrow at 4. Do you want me to postpone the meeting with the investors?" "That won't be necessary. I can handle both." Richard always managed to handle everything. It was his special talent. Organizing, planning, executing. People paid small fortunes for his efficiency. The phone rang and he picked it up on the first ring. Maves speaking. "Mr. Maves, this is Mary from Ethan's school. We need you to come pick up your son right now. There was an incident." Richard felt his stomach drop. "Is he hurt?" "Not physically, but he's very upset. His teacher will explain when you get here." On the way to the school, Richard drove faster than usual, something out of character for someone so controlled. His son was only 5 years old, 5 years and 3 months to be exact. He was all that remained of Clara, his wife, who passed away giving birth to Ethan. When Richard entered the principal's office, he saw Ethan sitting in a chair that was too small for him, staring at the floor. His brown hair fell over his eyes. "Mr. Maves," Principal Winters greeted him. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Ms. Thompson is waiting for us." Richard knelt in front of his son. "Hey, champ. Are you okay?" Ethan didn't lift his eyes. He just made a small movement with his head that could have meant anything. In the meeting room, Mrs. Thompson looked worried. "Mr. Maves, today during art class, I asked the children to draw their families." Ethan stared at the blank paper for a long time. When I tried to help him, he said he couldn't see the paper clearly. Richard frowned. "What do you mean, couldn't see?" I thought it was just an excuse, so I suggested he move closer. He said the colors were blurry and started crying. When the other kids tried to comfort him, he said he couldn't see their faces clearly. Principal Winters stepped in. "Mr. Maves, this isn't the first time Ethan has mentioned vision problems. Last month, his PE teacher noticed he was having trouble catching the ball." Richard felt like he was in court with all the evidence stacked against him. How had he not noticed before? "I'll take him to the doctor immediately," he said, trying to regain control of the situation. "There's one more thing," Ms. Thompson continued. "Ethan hardly interacts with the other kids. He stays by himself during recess. When children approach him, he barely responds. We're concerned." "He's just shy," Richard defended. "Like his mother." The two women exchanged glances. "Mr. Maves," Principal Winters said gently, "5-year-olds need social interaction. Ethan needs friends. And now he is with this vision issue." "I'll take care of it," Richard interrupted, standing up. "Thank you for letting me know." In the car, Ethan sat quietly in the back seat, gazing out the window. Richard watched him in the rearview mirror, feeling a mix of worry and guilt. "Want to tell me what happened today, champ?" Silence. "Ethan, you need to talk to me." "How can I help if I don't know what's going on?" The boy kept looking out the window. "The trees are getting blurry," he finally said, so softly Richard almost didn't hear. Richard felt a chill run down his spine. "How long have things been blurry?" Ethan shrugged. "Not sure." "A while. Why didn't you tell me before?" "You're always busy." Those simple words struck Richard like a slap. It was true. He was always busy. Meetings, cases, documents, deadlines. Ethan was just another item on his packed schedule. At home, Richard did something he rarely did. He called to cancel a meeting. "Laura, I need you to reschedule the meeting with Baker. I'm taking Ethan to the doctor first thing tomorrow." "But Mr. Maves, Mr. Baker came all the way from Chicago specifically." "Just reschedule," he cut her off. "It's a family emergency." After hanging up, Richard turned around and saw Ethan standing in the kitchen doorway. clutching the worn teddy bear Clara had bought while she was still pregnant. "I'm scared, Dad," Ethan said, his small voice trembling. Richard felt a lump in his throat. He didn't know how to deal with emotions, his or his son's. Ever since Clara had died, he'd focused on being practical, efficient. Feelings were too complicated. "It'll be fine," he said, not entirely sure of himself. "We'll find out what's going on and fix it." That night, after putting Ethan to bed, Richard sat alone in the empty kitchen with an untouched glass of whiskey. The house was far too big for just 2 people. It had 5 bedrooms, a library, a game room no one used. He had bought it when Clara was pregnant, imagining the family they would have. Now the empty spaces only amplified the silence. On the walls, there were photos of Clara everywhere. Richard wanted Ethan to know his mother's face, even if only in pictures. Clara was always smiling in them, her bright eyes promising a future that never came. "What am I supposed to do?" Richard asked Clara's photo on the wall. "I don't know how to be a father on my own." Silence was his only reply. The next day, Dr. Phillips's office was very different from the fancy law offices Richard was used to, just colorful walls and toys scattered around the waiting room. After what felt like an eternity of tests, the doctor asked to speak to Richard privately. "Mr. Maves, the results are concerning. Ethan has a condition called retinitis pigmentosa. It's a degenerative disease of the retina." Richard felt the ground disappear under his feet. "What does that mean exactly?" The doctor adjusted his glasses. "It means Ethan's peripheral vision is deteriorating and will continue to worsen over time. It's a rare condition, especially in someone so young. But he's going to go blind?" The word barely escaped his lips. "We can't predict the speed of progression. Some patients keep central vision for decades. Others—" The doctor hesitated. "Others lose it more quickly." Richard ran a hand over his face, trying to process the news. "Is there a cure?" "Unfortunately, no. But there are treatments that can slow the progression, and there are therapies to help him adapt to the changes in his vision." Richard looked through the glass door. Ethan was in the waiting room, flipping through a book and bringing it closer and closer to his eyes to see the pictures. "How do I tell him?" "He's only 5. With honesty, but without taking away his hope," the doctor replied. "Kids are surprisingly resilient, and he'll need you, Mr. Maves, a lot." On the way home, Richard tried to explain the situation in a way Ethan could understand. "Your eyes are special, champ. They work differently than most people's." Ethan looked at him with those big, innocent eyes, the same eyes that might not see him one day. "Different how?" Richard swallowed. "They'll need extra help. We'll see Dr. Phillips often, and he'll teach us how to take better care of them." "Will I go blind, Dad?" The direct question caught Richard off guard. "I heard the doctor talking," Ethan continued. "When you were in the room." Richard pulled the car to the shoulder. He turned to look his son in the eyes. "I don't know, Ethan, but I know that no matter what happens, I'll be with you. I promise." It was the first genuine promise he had made to his son in a long time. That night, after Ethan went to sleep, Richard cancelled the rest of his week's appointments. His clients could wait. His son could not. Sitting in his home office, surrounded by law books and trophies, Richard felt utterly lost. He was good at fixing legal problems, at winning impossible cases, but he couldn't win this one. He couldn't just fix Ethan's eyes. The phone rang. It was Martin, his partner at the firm. "Richard, what's going on? Laura said you cancelled everything this week. The Henderson case is in 3 days. "Ethan's sick," Richard said, his voice rough. "He has an eye disease. He's going to lose his sight, Martin." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "My God, Richard, I'm so sorry. Is there anything we can do?" "There's no cure." The words felt bitter in his mouth. "Just treatments to slow it down." "How are you holding up?" The question caught Richard by surprise. No one asked how he was doing. He was Richard Maves, the unbeatable attorney. The man who solved problems, not the man who had problems. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I don't know how to handle this. Do you want me to take over the Henderson case?" Richard thought for a moment. It was the biggest case of the year. The client would pay a fortune, But suddenly, it all seemed so insignificant. Yes, please. In fact, rearrange my cases for the next few weeks. I need time with Ethan. After hanging up, Richard went upstairs and quietly opened Ethan's bedroom door. The boy was asleep, clutching his worn teddy bear. His rocket-shaped nightlight cast stars on the ceiling. Richard sat on the edge of the bed, watching his son sleep. He realized he hadn't done this in years, simply watched Ethan without checking emails or thinking about the next case. "I'll do better," he whispered, brushing a curl of hair off his son's forehead. "I promise." The next morning, Richard did something unusual. He prepared a special breakfast. Animal-shaped pancakes with chocolate syrup and strawberries. They weren't perfect. In fact, they looked more like blobs with chocolate eyes, but it was a start. When Ethan walked into the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he stopped in surprise at the table. "Did you make all this?" Richard gave a somewhat embarrassed smile. "I tried. I'm not as good as your mother would have been." Ethan approached the table, eyeing the misshapen pancakes curiously. "Is this one an elephant?" "It was supposed to be a rabbit," Richard admitted. To his surprise, Ethan laughed, a small, precious sound Richard rarely heard. "It looks funny," the boy said, sitting down at the table. While they ate, Richard noticed how Ethan tilted his head to see better, how his eyes struggled to focus. How had he missed these signs before? "Ethan," he finally said, "I've been thinking, what if we take a few days just for the two of us?" The boy looked up, surprised. "But what about your work?" "My work can wait." "You're more important." "Really?" Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. "Really," Richard confirmed. "In fact, I was thinking we could go to the park tomorrow. You know, that big one with the lake and the ducks. What do you think?" A small smile appeared on Ethan's face. "Can we bring bread for the ducks?" "Of course we can," Richard replied. "And we can stay there as long as you like." After breakfast, Richard called Laura at the office. "I need you to cancel everything for the next few days. Martin is already taking over the Henderson case, but please reorganize the rest of my schedule." "Mr. Maves," Laura said, concerned, "there's the speech at the lawyers' conference, and Mr. Baker has already rescheduled twice." "Cancel everything," Richard repeated firmly. "For the first time in my career, I'm not available. My son needs me." When he hung up, Richard felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For years, his job had been his identity, his priority. Now, looking at Ethan sitting on the couch, holding a book close to his face, he realized how much he'd missed because of it. "What are you reading, champ?" Richard asked. Ethan held up the book. "It's about a boy who finds a dragon, but the letters are hard to see." Richard sat next to him. "How about I read it to you?" Ethan's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Sure," Richard said, taking the book. "Actually, we could make it a habit, read together every night." As he read about the boy and the dragon, Richard felt something unusual stir in his chest, a mix of sadness and determination. Sadness for the time already lost, for what Ethan would face in the future. Determination to be present now, to be the father his son deserved. That night, while putting away Ethan's toys, Richard found a drawing under the bed. Two stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands. Above them, in messy letters, were the words, "Me and Dad." Richard sat on the floor, holding the drawing gently. When was the last time he really held Ethan's hand? Not just to cross the street or go into school, but truly held it, connecting with him. He couldn't remember. Glancing around the silent house, at the expensive furniture and vacant spaces, Richard realized he had built a life that looked perfect on the outside, but was empty within. Ethan didn't need expensive toys or a huge house. He needed a dad who was there, who really saw him. And now, with Ethan's vision in danger, Richard finally understood what really mattered. Tomorrow, they would go to the park. A simple trip, but to Richard, it felt like the start of a new path. He didn't know what the future held for them, but he knew one thing. From now on, he would be truly present in his son's life. As he closed Ethan's bedroom door, Richard made a silent promise to himself and to Clara. He would be the father his son needed. Not just a provider, but a father in every sense. One who truly saw his child, even if one day Ethan could no longer see him. The next morning, Richard woke before his alarm. He lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling. His mind was already racing, planning the day. On the bedside table, his phone vibrated. It was a message from Laura, his secretary. Reminder: meeting with Petromax at 10 a.m., Henderson case at 2 p.m., conference call with Tokyo at 4 p.m. Richard looked at the message for a long moment. The Henderson case was the biggest of the year, a millionaire client who would pay a fortune. The kind of case that made careers and headlines. Normally, he would already be in the shower, refining his strategy. But today, something was different. He set the phone down and went to Ethan's room. He opened the door quietly and peeked inside. The boy was still asleep, hugging his worn teddy bear. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating his small face. Richard watched the slight crease on Ethan's brow, even in sleep, as though he was worried in his dreams. He noticed a storybook on the floor, the one they had read together the night before. It was the first time in years that Richard had read Ethan a bedtime story. "We're going to the park tomorrow," he had promised before Ethan went to sleep. "Really?" the boy had asked, disbelieving. "Really?" Richard answered. "I promise." Now, watching his sleeping son, Richard knew exactly what he needed to do. Returning to his room, he grabbed his phone and typed out a message to Laura. "Cancel all my appointments for today. Family emergency." His phone rang almost immediately. "Richard," Laura sounded alarmed. "Is everything all right? I've never seen you cancel an appointment, much less an entire day." "I'm fine, Laura, but I need this day with my son." "What about the Henderson case? They won't allow a delay. You know that." Richard took a deep breath. "Give it to Martin. He has my full support and all my notes." "Are you sure this could be worth millions?" "I'm sure," Richard interrupted. "Some things are more important." When he hung up, Richard felt something strange, a mix of guilt and relief. For the first time in his career, he had chosen to be a father over being a lawyer. In the kitchen, Richard started preparing breakfast. He wasn't great at cooking. Clara had always handled that. Since she died, he'd hired someone who came 3 times a week, and the rest of the time they ordered food or ate at restaurants. But this morning, he wanted to do something special. He tried again to make animal-shaped pancakes. This time, he focused, using chocolate chips for eyes and fruit for decoration. "Dad?" came Ethan's sleepy voice. "What are you doing?" Richard turned, slightly embarrassed by the mess in the kitchen. Flour dusted nearly every surface, and there was a haphazard pile of pancakes on the counter. "Making breakfast," he said, attempting confidence. "It's a special day, remember?" Ethan rubbed his eyes. "We're going to the park." "Exactly. And after a big day at the park, we need a big breakfast." Richard set a pancake on Ethan's plate. "This one's supposed to be a lion. See the ears?" Ethan studied the odd shape and smiled politely. "Cool." As they ate, Richard realized how rarely he sat down with his son on a weekday morning. Normally by now, Ethan would be at school and Richard would be at the office. "You know, you don't have to take me to the park," Ethan said suddenly, stirring his cereal with a spoon. "I know you have important work." Richard's chest tightened. "Nothing's more important than you, champ. And I promised, right? Today is for the park, just us. All day if you want." Ethan looked up, surprised. "All day?" "All day," Richard confirmed. "We can even have a picnic. How about that?" A small smile spread across Ethan's face. He rarely smiled like that. Richard nearly grabbed his phone to take a picture. After breakfast, they got ready to leave. Richard wasn't quite sure what to pack for a whole day outdoors. He stuffed a bag with snacks, water, sunscreen, and a few toys he found in Ethan's room. "Do we really need all that?" Ethan asked, eyeing the enormous bag. Richard shrugged. "Better safe than sorry. Isn't that what I always say?" "You usually say time is money," Ethan corrected him. Richard laughed, a bit sheepishly. "Yeah, I guess I do say that a lot, huh? But not today. Today, time is just time. For us to enjoy." The park was about a 20-minute drive away, an expanse of green in the city center. with a lake, playground, and lots of trees. Richard drove past it every day on his way to work, but almost never stopped. He simply didn't have time. When they arrived, the park was quiet. It was a weekday morning, and most kids were at school. A few retirees were feeding ducks, and a couple of mothers sat with very young children. "Where do you want to go first?" Richard asked, holding Ethan's hand. Ethan looked around, squinting. Richard noticed how he strained his eyes to focus. "Can we go see the ducks?" They headed to the lake. The day was bright and sunny, the kind of day Richard usually watched through an office window. They settled on a bench by the water. Richard dug into the bag and pulled out some bread. "Want to feed the ducks?" Ethan took a piece, a shy smile on his face. "Really?" "Absolutely." Ethan tossed the bread into the water, and a group of ducks quickly paddled over, quacking and jockeying for position. "Look, Dad, they're fighting." Ethan laughed, a sound Richard rarely got to hear. "Throw another one," Richard suggested. They spent nearly an hour there, feeding ducks and chatting about small as everyday things. Richard couldn't remember the last time they'd had such an unhurried conversation. "Do you want to check out the playground now?" Richard asked after they ran out of bread. Ethan nodded but looked slightly nervous. "What's up, champ?" "What if the other kids don't like me?" Ethan asked in a tiny voice, almost too soft to hear. Richard knelt in front of him. "Why wouldn't they like you?" Ethan shrugged. "At school, nobody plays with me. They say I'm weird because I'm quiet." Richard's heart sank. "You're not weird, Ethan. You're amazing. If any kid here is nice enough to really get to know you, they'll see how incredible you are." Ethan didn't look entirely convinced, but he followed his father toward the playground. Only 2 other kids were there, an older boy on a swing and a little girl making a sandcastle. "Want to try the slide?" Richard offered. Ethan eyed it, hesitating. "I can't see the top very well." It struck Richard that he hadn't considered how to handle Ethan's diminishing sight in everyday play. It was new territory for both of them. "How about the swings then?" "I can push you," Ethan agreed, and they walked over to the swings. Richard helped his son get on and started to push, slowly at first, then higher. "Higher, Dad!" Ethan called out, giggling. Richard pushed harder, smiling at the sound of his son's laughter, a precious sound he wanted to keep forever. After the swings, Ethan decided he wanted to try the slide. Richard stayed close, ready to help if Ethan got disoriented. To his surprise, Ethan climbed the steps slowly but determinedly. "I can see you, Dad," he called from the top. "I'm right here at the bottom, waiting," Richard called back. Ethan slid down, shrieking with delight, landing in his father's arms. Both of them laughed, and Richard gave Ethan a tight hug. "Again," Ethan said. They spent the entire morning on that playground. Richard realized he'd never seen his son so free and happy. Why hadn't he done this before? Why did he wait until Ethan was losing his sight to discover the joy of a simple day in the park? At noon, they spread a blanket on the grass for a picnic. Richard had packed sandwiches of fruit and juice. "Best day ever," Ethan said, biting into his sandwich. Richard smiled. "I agree. We should do this more often." "Can we?" "Of course we can. I'll reorganize my work. We'll have more days like this." After lunch, Ethan wanted to return to the playground. By now it was busier. Several kids were running around, laughing and shouting. Richard noticed Ethan withdrawing a bit as more people arrived. "Want to go somewhere else?" he asked. Ethan looked at the sandbox, where a small girl played alone. She had dark hair in braids and wore a brightly colored dress already smudged with sand. "Can I play there?" Ethan asked, pointing. "Of course," Richard replied. "Want me to go with you?" Ethan thought for a moment, then shook his head. "I'll go by myself." Richard took a seat on a nearby bench, watching as Ethan walked hesitantly toward the sandbox. He stopped at the edge, as though unsure what to do next. The girl looked up and saw Ethan standing there. Richard expected her to ignore him or, and worse, reject him. To his surprise, she smiled and motioned for him to come closer. Ethan stepped into the sandbox and sat down a little way from her. She tilted her head, watching him curiously. Then she stood, walked over to him and sat down right in front of him. Richard couldn't hear what they were saying. but he saw the girl talking while Ethan listened intently. Then, after a moment, she picked up a handful of sand and showed him something. He leaned closer to see. What happened next almost made Richard's heart stop. Ethan smiled. Not a small, polite smile, but a wide, genuine grin that lit up his entire face, one Richard hadn't seen in a very long time. The girl said something else, and Ethan laughed. It was a clear, light sound that rang across the playground. Richard felt tears welling in his eyes. There was something about that simple scene, his son laughing with a stranger in a sandbox, that affected him more deeply than he could have imagined. The girl began building something in the sand, and Ethan joined in. They worked together, talking in low voices. Richard watched, fascinated by how naturally the girl included his son. Eventually, the girl pointed to Ethan's eyes and said something. Ethan looked surprised, then nodded. She smiled, took his hand, and placed it on the sand, guiding him so he could feel what they'd built. Richard realized she'd noticed Ethan's vision difficulty, and instead of treating him differently, found a way to help him participate. A 5-year-old child had done naturally what many adults wouldn't know how to do. The afternoon flew by. Richard sat on the bench, captivated by the two kids playing. At one point, the girl looked over and waved at him. He waved back, smiling. As the sun began to set, Richard saw a woman approaching the sandbox, obviously the girl's mother, calling her to go home. The girl stood and spoke to Ethan. He seemed sad but waved. Before leaving, she leaned in and whispered something in Ethan's ear. To Richard's surprise, Ethan smiled again, that same big, genuine grin. "Time to go, champ," Richard said, walking over. Ethan stood, brushing sand off his clothes. "Dad, I made a friend." "I saw," Richard said, smiling. "How you looked like you were having fun." "Her name's Lily," Ethan said enthusiastically, "and guess what she told me? She said, 'You look sad. I know how to cure you.'" "Really?" Richard raised an eyebrow. "And how's she going to cure you?" "I don't know yet," Ethan replied, eyes shining in a way Richard hadn't seen in months. "She said she'd tell me tomorrow." "Can we come back tomorrow, Dad, please?" Richard looked at his son, those pleading eyes, his face more alive than it had been in a long time. A new feeling welled up inside him, hope. "Sure, we can come back tomorrow," he said, taking Ethan's hand. "Absolutely." On the way back to the car, Ethan chattered non-stop about Lily and everything they had played. Richard listened in awe at the transformation in his son. One simple afternoon at the park, one decision to skip an important case, and everything had changed. In the car, Richard glanced at his phone. 15 missed calls and a dozen messages. The world hadn't ended because he took a day off. The Henderson case would go on without him. Clients would find other lawyers. But no one else could be Ethan's father. No one else could restore the light in his son's eyes, only he could. Richard put the phone away without responding to any messages. Tomorrow, they'd be back at the park, to find Lily, to see how she planned to cure Ethan's sadness, and to follow that small spark of hope that had ignited that day. The following days brought changes Richard never imagined, changes so simple yet so profound that he often found himself watching Ethan as if seeing him for the first time. It all started with a request the morning after they first met Lily. "Dad, can we go to the park today?" Ethan asked over breakfast. Richard eyed his son, surprised, not by the question but by the energy in the boy's voice. It was as if a small flame had been lit inside him. "Of course we can, champ. But what about school?" Ethan stirred his cereal, thinking, "We can go after school. Lily said she'll be there at 4. Richard smiled. "Deal. I'll pick you up from school and we'll go straight to the park." Ethan's excitement about seeing Lily again did something remarkable. He finished breakfast quickly, brushed his teeth without needing a reminder, and was ready for school 15 minutes early. "We're early today," Richard noted, surprised. "The sooner I start my day, the sooner I get to see Lily at the park," Ethan answered, with perfect logic. On the way to school, Ethan talked more than Richard had heard him speak in months about Lily, how she taught him to make sandcastles in a special way, how she could imitate animal sounds, how she promised to show him a secret place in the park. Sounds like you really like her, Richard commented. She's nice, Ethan said simply, and she doesn't look at me funny when I can't see things well. That simple statement hit Richard like an arrow. How many times must Ethan have felt different or odd because of his condition? How many kids had shunned him or treated him with impatience? And here was Lily, accepting him exactly as he was. After dropping Ethan off at school, Richard did something else unusual. He rearranged his schedule for the rest of the week, keeping his afternoons free. Martin had taken the Henderson case, but there were dozens of other cases demanding attention. "Laura, I need you to reschedule all my afternoon meetings for the morning," he told his secretary on the phone. "All of them. But Mr. Maves, your mornings are already packed. Then cancel whatever can't be moved. I have an important commitment with Ethan every afternoon this week." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Maves, are you sure you're all right? You never cancel appointments, and now..." "I'm all right, Laura. Actually, I'm better than I've been in a long time." By 3:30, Richard was parked outside Ethan's school, waiting eagerly. When his son came out, his eyes searched the playground until they landed on his father. A small smile appeared. "Shall we?" Richard asked, holding out his hand. At the park, Lily was already in the sandbox, as she'd promised. She wore a faded yellow dress and had her braids tied with colorful ribbons. She waved excitedly when she saw Ethan. "You came," she said when Ethan approached. "I said I would," he replied, still a bit shy. Richard watched from a distance, sitting on the same bench as before. There was something magical in the way these two kids interacted. Lily talked animatedly with quick gestures of her small hands, and Ethan listened as if every word was priceless. Soon they were playing together, building something in the sand. Richard noticed how Lily always described what she was doing aloud, letting Ethan join in even when he couldn't see clearly. She'd guide his hand, showing him shapes and textures. "Look, Dad," Ethan called out after a while. "We made a magic castle." Richard walked over to see their creation, a mound of sand dotted with sticks and leaves. It didn't look much like a castle, but the pride on Ethan's face was unmistakable. "It's the most impressive castle I've ever seen," Richard declared, crouching down to take a closer look. "It's a magic castle," Lily explained, eyes shining. "If you look at it the right way, you can see towers and flags, and even a dragon guarding the treasure." Richard looked at the pile of sand, trying to see what Lily described. "And what's the right way to look at it?" "With the eyes of your heart," she answered promptly. "Not with these." She pointed to her own eyes. Richard looked at Ethan, who seemed to understand exactly what Lily meant. There was a bond between them that went beyond words. That afternoon established a routine. Every day after school, Richard took Ethan to the park so he could meet Lily. Every day the two children played, talked, and laughed together. And every day, Richard watched, amazed at the transformation happening right before his eyes. The first week, Ethan was still reserved, talking more with Lily than with his father. But as time went by, something incredible began to happen. "Dad, look what Lily taught me," Ethan shouted one afternoon, running toward Richard. He was carefully holding a bird feather. "She said if you blow it gently like this," he demonstrated, sending the feather floating. "It's like magic." It was the first time in ages Ethan had started a conversation with his dad, sharing something enthusiastically. On another day, Richard arrived late at the park. Approaching the sandbox, he heard something that made him stop in his tracks. Ethan's laughter. Not a quiet chuckle, but a full-throated laugh that echoed across the playground. Lily had apparently made a funny face, and Ethan was laughing like it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. That night, while serving dinner, Richard noticed another change. "Dad, Lily told me that stars are like lanterns hanging in the sky. Do you think that's true?" Richard smiled. "It's a beautiful way to look at them. Can we see the stars tonight?" "Sure." After dinner, they sat in the backyard, gazing at the night sky. Ethan nestled by his father, pointing at the different pinpoints of light. "That one's bigger, so it must be a special lantern," he decided. Richard looked at his son, feeling a tightness in his throat. How long had it been since they shared a moment like this? As the weeks went by, Richard started joining the children's games. At first, he felt awkward, an attorney in an expensive suit playing in the sand. But the sound of Ethan's laughter was worth any discomfort. "Do you guys need help with that castle?" he asked one day, kneeling down in the sand. Lily eyed him with her big, wise eyes. "Can you make tall towers?" "Well, I used to build pillow forts as a kid," Richard replied. "Maybe we can use the same idea for sand." Soon, he was as engrossed in castle building as they were. His suit was covered in sand, his pricey shoes were ruined, but he didn't care. The joy on Ethan's face was all that mattered. A month after meeting Lily, their lives had completely changed. Afternoons at the park were sacred. Richard had reorganized his job, delegated cases, and cut back his hours. His colleagues were shocked. His clients were disappointed, but he held firm. "My son needs me right now," he explained to Martin over lunch one day. And honestly, I think he always did. I just didn't see it. At home, the changes were even more obvious. Ethan was no longer that quiet, withdrawn boy. He talked during dinner, telling stories about everything he and Lily had done. He drew more, filling the fridge with colorful pictures, many depicting a girl with braids and a yellow dress. Ethan still had regular appointments with Dr. Phillips. His condition hadn't improved. That was impossible, the doctor said. But his adaptation had. "I'm impressed with his progress," Dr. Phillips remarked during one visit. "He's adjusting very well to the changes in his vision. Occupational therapy is helping, but there's something else going on. He seems happier." "He made a friend," Richard explained, "a girl named Lily. They meet at the park every day." The doctor smiled. "Sometimes the best medicine doesn't come in bottles." One particularly sunny afternoon, about 6 weeks after Lily had come into their lives, the kids decided to play hide and seek. Richard worried. How could Ethan manage with his limited sight? "Are you sure you want to play, champ?" he asked, hesitating. "Yes," Ethan answered eagerly. "Lily taught me a special way. She makes a little bird sound so I can find her." Richard stood watching, fascinated, as the children played. Lily would hide and make soft chirping noises so Ethan could use his hearing to locate her. When it was Ethan's turn to hide, Lily pretended to have trouble finding him, even if he was only partially hidden. "You're really good at this," she exclaimed when she finally found him. Ethan's smile lit up his whole face. After their game, they rested under a tree. Richard joined them, bringing juice and snacks. "Thanks, Mr. Maves," Lily said politely as she took a cup of juice. "You can call me Richard," he replied with a smile. "Richard," she repeated, as if testing the sound. "My dad's name is Mark." Richard noticed Lily rarely talked about her family or home. He only knew that someone dropped her off each afternoon and picked her up later. Sometimes a young woman he presumed was her mom, sometimes a tall, thin man. While they snacked, Ethan gazed up at the leaves above them, where the sun peeked through. "You know, Dad," he said suddenly, "with Lily, it feels like I see better." Richard felt a chill. "What do you mean, champ?" Ethan thought for a moment. "It's like, when I'm with her, it doesn't matter so much that I can't see everything. She shows me things differently, with her hands, with sounds, and sometimes, when she describes something, I can see it in my head better than with my eyes." Lily smiled and took Ethan's hand. "That's because we're best friends. Best friends help each other see things nobody else can." Richard watched the two children beneath the tree, hands linked, the afternoon sun creating a golden glow around them. He felt a surge of warmth and gratitude in his chest. In that moment, he realized what was growing there. This friendship, this connection, this way of seeing the world was priceless. It couldn't be bought with all the money he earned or traded for all the major cases he might win. Ethan's smile, the light in his eyes, the way he spoke and moved with confidence, these were worth more than anything Richard had ever owned. Watching them run off to play again, Richard reflected on how his life had changed in just a few weeks. The old him would have considered these afternoons at the park a waste of productive time. Now, he couldn't imagine a better way to spend his hours. "Dad, come play with us," Ethan called, waving. Richard stood, brushing dirt from his pants. "I'm coming." When he joined the children's latest game, Richard realized he wasn't the only one learning to see the world differently. He was too. Somewhere in the midst of those park afternoons, among the sandcastles and the hide-and-seek, the laughter and the made-up stories, Richard rediscovered something he'd lost long ago. the ability to see with his heart. And thanks to a little girl in braids and a yellow dress, both father and son were learning to live again. Really live, not just exist. That night, after tucking Ethan in, Richard found a new drawing on his son's desk. 3 stick figures this time, a tall man, a small boy, and a girl with braids. They were all holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Across the top, in Ethan's childish scrawl, were the words, "My family." Richard sat on the edge of the bed, looking at his sleeping son. "Thank you for teaching me how to see," he whispered, kissing Ethan's forehead. Outside, the stars shimmered like lanterns hanging in the sky. The park was no longer just a meeting place for Ethan and Lily. It had become like a second home to them. Every tree, bench, and patch of sand held a story, an adventure, a shared laugh. On that sunny Thursday afternoon, the sky seemed particularly blue. Richard and Ethan arrived a bit early, and Ethan practically jumped out of the car before it had fully stopped. "Easy, champ," Richard teased. "Lily's not going anywhere." "But we have to finish the fort we started yesterday," Ethan insisted, tugging at his father's hand impatiently. Over the last 2 months, Richard had watched in awe as his son transformed. The quiet, downcast boy was gone, replaced by a curious, talkative child. His smiles, once so rare, appeared easily now, and it was all thanks to a friendship that began by chance in a sandbox. When they reached the playground, Lily wasn't there yet. "She's late," Ethan said, frowning. "Maybe she got held up at home," Richard replied, checking his watch. "She's only 10 minutes late, champ." Ethan plopped down on the edge of the sandbox, eyes fixed on the path where Lily usually appeared. Richard took his usual seat on the nearby bench, balancing some paperwork he had brought. Lately, he'd adapted to a new routine. He worked in the park while the kids played. 20 minutes later, Lily finally came running along the stone path. She wasn't alone. A young woman accompanied her, holding her hand. "Sorry I'm late," Lily called from halfway across the playground. Ethan jumped up, face lighting up. "I thought you weren't coming." Lily arrived, out of breath, her braids bouncing with each step. "I'd never miss our playtime. We just had a small problem at home." Richard approached, curious about the woman with Lily. She was young, possibly in her early 30s, with the same dark hair as Lily, though shorter. She wore simple jeans, a colorful blouse, and carried a heavy-looking tote bag. "Hi," she said, extending her free hand. "I'm Sandra, Lily's mom. You must be Richard. Lily talks about you and Ethan all the time." Richard shook her hand. "Pleased to finally meet you. Ethan can't stop talking about Lily either." Sandra smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reminded Richard of Lily's. "Sorry we're late today. I had a last-minute delivery." "A delivery?" "Cakes," she said, lifting the tote bag. "I bake cakes to order." "Actually, I brought something for you." She opened the bag and took out a small cardboard box. "Chocolate cupcakes. Lily said Ethan loves chocolate." Richard was taken aback. "Oh, you didn't have to go to any trouble." "It's no trouble," Sandra replied. "It's the least I can do. Lily comes home so happy these days. Her friendship with Ethan means the world to her." Richard glanced at Ethan and Lily, who had already run off to the sandbox. "It means a lot to Ethan too, more than I can say." Sandra checked her watch. "I have another delivery, so would you mind keeping Lily for a bit longer? My husband will pick her up at 6. "No problem," Richard said. "We'll be here until then." After Sandra left, Richard sat back on the bench, sampling one of the cupcakes. It was delicious, dense, moist, with just the right amount of sweetness. As he worked through some documents, he couldn't help overhearing Ethan and Lily's animated conversation. "My mom baked 10 cakes last night," Lily was saying, shaping small piles of sand. "She stayed up so late. When I woke up, she was still decorating the last one." "Does your mom make cakes every day?" Ethan asked, clearly fascinated. "Almost. Sometimes they're big birthday cakes. Sometimes they're small, like these cupcakes. She's the best cake maker in the whole world." "What about your dad? What does he do?" Ethan asked innocently. Richard glanced up from his paperwork, interested in the answer. Lily continued patting the sand. "My dad's looking for work right now. He used to build big buildings, but his company closed. Now he stays at home with me when I'm not at school, and my mom bakes the cakes. He must be really nice, Ethan said. He's the best dad in the world, Lily declared proudly. He tells amazing stories and teaches me how to fix things. Yesterday we fixed the fan that was broken. He says we shouldn't buy new stuff when we can fix the old. Richard found himself smiling at Lily's pride, even under circumstances many would find challenging. She talked about her home life as though it was filled with wonders. As the afternoon wore on, Richard learned more about Lily's family through the kids' chatter. Sandra had been selling cakes for 2 years. Before that, she worked in a restaurant, but left to focus on Lily and to earn more on her own. Mark, Lily's father, had been out of work for 8 months, since the construction company he worked for shut down. "Do you live nearby?" Richard asked when the kids came over for some water. 6 blocks away, Lily replied, pointing down the street. "On Oak Street. It's a small house, but it has the best backyard in the world. My dad built me a swing on a big tree." "That sounds wonderful," Richard commented. "It's the best place ever," Lily exclaimed. "We have plants everywhere. My mom loves flowers, and my dad painted my room yellow because it's my favorite color." Richard felt a twinge of something, not quite envy, but a wistful admiration. The way Lily described her simple home sounded warmer than any description Ethan could give of their 3-story mansion. After the kids went back to the sandbox, Richard mulled over what he'd just heard. Their family facing financial struggle, but apparently rich in other ways money couldn't buy. He thought of his own situation, a successful lawyer with financial security who, until recently, barely knew his own son. At 6 o'clock, a tall, thin man walked into the park. Lily waved excitedly. "That's my dad," she cried, running over to him. Mark looked older than Richard expected, maybe late 30s. He had dark hair like Lily's, streaked with grey at the temples, and a kind face lined with worry. He wore faded jeans and a flannel shirt with rolled-up sleeves. "Daddy! Daddy!" Lily jumped into his arms. "This is Ethan, my best friend, and that's his dad, Richard." Mark set Lily down and held out his hand. "Mark Thompson, nice to finally meet you. Lily hasn't stopped talking about you." Richard shook his hand, calloused and strong, the hand of someone used to manual labor. "Richard Maves. Likewise. Ethan and Lily have become inseparable." Mark smiled, ruffling Lily's hair. "I've never seen her so excited about a friend before. You two have become really important to her." While they chatted, Ethan whispered something to Lily. She beamed and looked at her father. "Daddy, can Ethan come to our house sometime?" Mark looked mildly surprised but smiled. "Of course, sweetheart, if his dad says it's okay." 4 heads turned to Richard. "Please, Dad," Ethan begged, eyes full of hope. "I want to see her house." Richard hesitated for only a moment. "If it's not too much trouble for you." "Not at all," Mark answered. "We'd love to have you. How about Sunday? Sandra doesn't have any deliveries on Sundays." "Sunday sounds great," Richard agreed. Ethan and Lily both lit up with matching excited grins. On Sunday, Richard drove slowly down Oak Street, searching for the house number Mark had given him. It was a modest neighborhood. Small, tidy houses lined the street. "That's it," Ethan said, pointing to a light blue house with a small garden in front. Richard parked and studied the home for a moment. It was tiny compared to his mansion, a sloped roof, small but bright windows, and a front yard filled with potted flowers of every shape and color. "Let's go, Dad." Ethan was already unbuckling his seatbelt. Before they reached the front gate, the door swung open and Lily rushed out in her signature yellow dress. "You made it," she squealed, hugging Ethan. Mark and Sandra followed close behind, smiling and waving. "Welcome," Sandra called. "Come on in." The inside was exactly how Richard had imagined it, small but incredibly cozy. The living room had a worn but clean sofa adorned with bright handmade cushions. The walls were decorated with framed crayon drawings, clearly Lily's creations, and family photos. "It's modest," Mark said, almost apologetically, "but it's home." "It's lovely," Richard said sincerely. A delicious smell wafted from the kitchen, mingling with the scent of fresh flowers in vases. A shelf held board games and a few books, and a well-worn guitar leaned in the corner. "Come see my room." Lily grabbed Ethan's hand, pulling him down the hallway. Sandra smiled. "Go ahead. I'll finish up lunch. I hope you like lasagna." While Mark gave Richard a quick tour, Richard couldn't help noticing the little details that revealed so much about this family: photos of birthdays past, children's drawings taped to the fridge, a calendar on the wall with cake delivery dates written in neat rows. A home where every inch was lived in and loved. The backyard was small, but as Lily had promised, featured a big tree with a swing. Mark explained how he built it using recycled materials. "You don't need much to be happy," he said. "Just enough." Lunch was served at a tiny kitchen table that barely sat 5. Sandra's lasagna was incredible, and she'd baked a chocolate cake for dessert, Ethan's favorite, that made Richard understand why her cupcakes were so popular. The meal was filled with laughter and stories. Mark shared tales of his old construction job. Sandra talked about how she started baking, and Lily frequently interjected with her own colorful commentary. Richard noticed how relaxed Ethan seemed, talking and laughing more than he ever did at home. There was something about the warmth of this little house that brought out the best in him. After dessert, the kids ran off to the backyard to try the swing. Richard helped Sandra clear the dishes, despite her polite protests. "You have a wonderful home," he said, drying a plate. Sandra smiled. "It's not big, but it's full of love. And that's what really matters, right?" "Yes," Richard agreed, thinking of his own vast, nearly empty house. "It really is." On the drive home, Ethan couldn't stop talking about everything he'd seen and done. The swing in the backyard, the drawings on Lily's bedroom wall, the stories Mark had told. "Their house is cool, isn't it, Dad?" Ethan asked, eyes shining despite his limited vision. "It's very cool," Richard replied. "It's not as big as ours, but it feels happier." That innocent observation hit Richard like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, champ?" Ethan thought about it. "They're always laughing and talking and doing things together. Our house is so big, but sometimes it's so quiet." Richard swallowed hard. "You're right. We need to change that." When they got back to their imposing mansion, Richard saw it with fresh eyes. The huge, silent rooms, the tasteful but impersonal decor, the spaces that went unused. Compared to the Thompsons' cozy, bustling home, his place felt more like a museum, beautiful but lifeless. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, Richard sat in his office, deep in thought. He remembered Lily's proud voice as she spoke of her unemployed dad, Sandra's tired but content smile as she served homemade lasagna, Mark's stories about building and fixing things. Then he thought about Lily herself, how she had brought color back into Ethan's world, showed him how to see with more than just his eyes, filled their quiet lives with laughter and stories. A wave of gratitude so intense it nearly overwhelmed him coursed through Richard. How could he repay a family who, without even trying, had saved his? His eyes fell on a stack of resumes on his desk. His firm was hiring a new facilities manager to oversee maintenance in several offices across the country, someone with Mark's skills. Richard picked up the phone, his mind alight with possibilities. It wouldn't be charity, the firm truly needed someone like Mark. And Sandra's cakes. The office often ordered baked goods for meetings. Maybe there was a way to give back, without diminishing this family's pride, something that honored the lives they'd built through hard work and love. Richard smiled as he scribbled notes. For the first time in ages, he felt genuinely inspired, not by a legal challenge or a high-profile client, but by something far more valuable, the chance to make a difference for people who had changed his life. Early Monday morning, after visiting the Thompsons, Richard arrived at the office before usual. He'd spent half the night planning. When Laura came in with the day's schedule, he was already on his third coffee. "Morning, Mr. Maves, you're in early." Richard nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "Laura, I need your help with some changes." For the next hour, he outlined his plan. Laura listened, jotting notes and occasionally raising an eyebrow. After all, it wasn't every day that Richard Maves, known for his near-obsessive dedication, decided to overhaul his professional life. "So, in summary," Laura said, "you want to create a new facilities manager position, reduce your personal caseload, and switch our baked goods supplier for office events." Richard chuckled. That's it in a nutshell. May I ask what brought on these sudden changes? Richard twirled a pen between his fingers. Let's just say I've recently discovered the value of some things money can't buy. That same afternoon, after his scheduled meetings, Richard drove to Oak Street. He'd called Mark earlier, asking to talk privately. He parked outside the light blue house, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation, emotions he rarely felt, even before major trials. Mark greeted him on the porch, looking a bit anxious. "Richard, is everything okay? Is Ethan all right?" "He's fine. Better than ever," Richard reassured him. "I actually wanted to discuss something else with you. Mind if we walk?" As they strolled the quiet neighborhood, Richard explained about the open position. He described the responsibilities, the salary, significantly higher than Mark's previous job, and the benefits. "This isn't charity," Richard emphasized. "My firm genuinely needs someone with your experience. Our last facilities manager retired 3 months ago, and we haven't found the right fit." Mark stopped walking, eyeing Richard with an expression that was hard to read. "Why me? There must be dozens of construction supervisors in town." Richard held his gaze. "Because I've seen how you handle your home, how you improvise solutions with limited resources. I've seen the pride Lily takes in how you fix things. I need someone who doesn't just understand construction, but who knows the value of every dollar spent. Someone who'll treat the office like it's his own house." Mark fell silent for a long moment. "I don't want this to be about the kids," he finally said. "I don't want a job out of pity." "It's not pity," Richard said firmly. "It's an opportunity. I have 5 offices across 3 states that need regular oversight. I need someone dependable, who knows the field. Yes, I met you through our kids, but I'm offering this job because of what I've seen in you." After a few more questions, Mark agreed to come to the office for a formal interview. "I'm not promising anything," he cautioned. "I need to see if it's really something I can do." "That's fair," Richard replied. "And there's one more thing." Richard mentioned his plan to regularly order cakes and sweets for the office, for birthdays, meetings, and corporate events. "We currently buy from a bakery downtown, but after tasting Sandra's cakes, well, there's no comparison. Would she be interested in supplying our events?" Mark broke into a grin. "You'd have to ask her, but I can tell you it would be a dream come true. Sandra's always wanted to expand, but we haven't had the capital or contacts." When they returned, Sandra was in the kitchen, covered in flour. The smell of vanilla and cinnamon filled the air. "Richard, what a nice surprise. Lily and Ethan aren't here." "I'm actually here to talk business," Richard said, "with both of you." Sandra listened carefully as he described the possibility of weekly orders, event catering, and the potential for even larger commissions. Her eyes widened at the numbers. "That's more than I make in 2 months," she murmured, sounding both thrilled and overwhelmed. "It's just an offer," Richard clarified quickly. "I understand if it's too much or—" "No," Sandra laughed. "Not too much. Just, it sounds too good to be true." "Everything happens for a reason," Richard said seriously. "You have no idea how much Lily has done for Ethan. For both of us, really. I'm not offering anything you don't deserve on your own merits. But I won't pretend I'm not grateful." Sandra exchanged a look with Mark. Some silent communication passed between them. "Could we think about it?" Mark asked. "Of course," Richard said, heading for the door. "No pressure. The offer stands whenever you decide. Just, please, don't mention this to the kids yet," he added at the door, "especially about Mark's potential job. I don't want Lily or Ethan thinking anything will change between them." 3 days later, Mark showed up at the firm for the formal interview. He wore a suit that was slightly too big, probably borrowed, but had made an effort to look professional. The HR department conducted the interview, while Richard observed to ensure everything went through proper channels. Mark impressed everyone with his practical knowledge and experience. By day's end, the job was his. "Thank you," he told Richard, shaking hands to seal the deal. "This means more than I can ever say." Richard smiled. "Just do a good job. That's all I'm asking." As for Sandra, she agreed to start with smaller office orders to see if she could handle the volume. The first time her cupcakes were served at a board meeting, Richard had the pleasure of seeing normally stoic executives squabble over the last one. Within weeks, Maves and Associates had a new facilities manager who was incredibly dedicated and a new go-to cake supplier for every event. But the biggest changes of all were happening in Richard's personal life. Sticking to his plan, he significantly reduced his hours. He delegated cases, turned down new clients, and reorganized his schedule so he could be home every afternoon. The firm could run without him for a few hours a day, he discovered. The world didn't end if he wasn't available 24/7. Ethan, on the other hand, needed him, and now Richard was there. Every afternoon, after picking Ethan up from school, they had a ritual. Sometimes they'd go to the park to meet Lily. Other times, they'd stay home and explore new hobbies together. Richard discovered he liked cooking, something he'd never tried. They started with simple recipes: pancakes, cookies, mac and cheese. Often, the results were disastrous, but the laughter they shared was worth every failed attempt. "I don't think it's supposed to be black," Ethan observed one afternoon, regarding a tray of charred cookies. Richard laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "Maybe we need Sandra to give us lessons, huh?" Another day, they tried building a model airplane. Used to precision in his legal work, Richard felt frustrated when tiny pieces slipped through his fingers. For Ethan, with his limited vision, it was an even bigger challenge. "We need a magnifying glass," Ethan said after his third failed attempt to glue a miniature part. The next day, Richard showed up with the biggest magnifying glass he could find. Together, patiently and with plenty of laughter, they finally finished the model. It wasn't perfect, several pieces were crooked, but it was theirs. The little plane took pride of place on Ethan's shelf. Even their nights changed. Instead of working late in his office, Richard spent at least an hour reading to Ethan before bed. They started with easy books, then moved on to longer stories that took several nights to finish. "Just one more chapter, Dad," Ethan would plead whenever Richard tried to stop. Discovering he loved those quiet evening hours as much as Ethan, Richard almost always gave in. The transformation in Ethan was visible to everyone. His posture, once hunched and guarded, was now upright and assured. His voice, once a timid whisper, filled the house with questions, comments, and laughter. Even the way he walked changed. His steps were more certain, as though he knew exactly where he was going, despite his visual limits. One Saturday, as they walked through the mall to buy Ethan new clothes, he'd grown considerably in the past few months. They passed a music store. Ethan stopped, fascinated by the guitars in the display window. "Lily's dad has a guitar," he remarked. "He plays songs for us sometimes." Richard looked at his son, noticing the spark of interest in his eyes. "Would you like to learn how to play?" Ethan's face lit up. "Could we?" "Sure. We can learn together." That same afternoon, they left the store with 2 guitars, a small one for Ethan and a regular-sized one for Richard, and a promise to take weekly lessons. The guitar lessons became another ritual. Richard, never one for hobbies, found himself practicing in his spare moments, determined to master at least a few basic chords before the next lesson. Lily, of course, remained a constant presence in their lives. She visited Richard's home frequently, bringing her contagious energy into rooms that had once been silent. With her there, the vast hallways seemed alive with echoes of laughter and running feet. What amazed Richard most was how Lily remained unchanged despite her family's improving circumstances. Even with her dad now employed in a prestigious job and her mom's cake business flourishing, Lily was still the same bright, straightforward girl they'd met at the park. "Does your dad like his new job?" Richard asked her one afternoon as the kids played in his yard. "He loves it," Lily answered, not taking her eyes off the blocks she was stacking. "He says it's like building buildings, but now he takes care of them after they're done. He likes working for you, but said you're not as bossy as you seem." Richard nearly choked on his tea, laughing. "He said that, did he?" "Oops!" Lily clapped a hand to her mouth, eyes dancing with mischief. "Maybe I wasn't supposed to tell." That disarming honesty was what made Lily so special. She spoke her mind without filters. In a world Richard was used to, full of half-truths and hidden agendas, her sincerity was like a breath of fresh air. A month into Mark's new job, Richard received an unexpected call during a meeting. It was Ethan's school. "Mr. Maves, this is Principal Winters. There was a small accident at recess. Ethan's fine upon, but we think you should come get him. Richard's heart pounded. I'm on my way. Without hesitation, he excused himself from the clients, letting Martin finish. A few months ago, he'd have considered it unthinkable to abandon an important meeting. Now he didn't think twice. At school, he found Ethan in the nurse's office with a bandage on his knee. What happened, champ? He asked, gently examining the scrape. We were playing tag, Ethan explained, sounding more excited than hurt. I fell, but I didn't cry. The nurse smiled. He was very brave, but we thought we should call you because he bumped his head too. It's minor, but given his condition, Richard nodded, relieved. Thanks for letting me know. I'll take him to the doctor just to be sure. In the car, Ethan gazed out the window, clearly untroubled by his mishap. Know what was really cool, Dad? He said suddenly. When I fell, everyone came over to check on me. I have friends now, lots of friends. Richard felt his throat tighten. Of course you do, you're a great kid. And guess what else? Ethan continued. I told everyone my dad is a super lawyer who helps people. Tommy said his dad is a firefighter and saves people. But I said you save people too, just in a different way. Richard blinked back tears. Oh, really? Yeah. Ethan turned to face him, eyes shining with admiration. You're my hero, Dad, like Superman, only real. In that moment, driving toward the hospital with his son by his side, Richard felt how drastically his life had changed. Not long ago, he defined himself by his career successes. Now, the greatest title he had was Ethan's hero. Dr. Phillips examined Ethan carefully, especially his eyes. I see no damage, the doctor said after the checkup, but I'm amazed how well he moves given his condition. He seems far more confident than he was last time. He has a special friend, Richard explained. She taught him to look at the world differently. The doctor smiled. Sometimes the best medicine doesn't come from a hospital. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Richard sat on the porch, sipping a glass of wine while gazing at the stars. He thought about how life had changed in the past few months. His son, once so quiet and sad, now filled their home with excitement and laughter. His career, once his entire identity, now took second place. And his big house, once just a place to sleep between workdays, was finally becoming a real home. It all started with a devastating diagnosis and an afternoon at the park, with a little girl in a yellow dress who showed his son how to see beyond his eyes. Richard raised his glass in a silent toast to the moon, a gesture of gratitude for life's unexpected turns, for the Thompsons, who had entered his life at the perfect time, for Lily, whose childlike wisdom changed everything, and most of all, for Ethan, his son, his hero. Saturday morning arrived like so many others in recent months. Richard woke with the first rays of sunshine peeking through the window. He'd gotten used to early mornings, even on weekends. Before, he would have used that extra hour to work, but now he savored the quiet moments of a waking house. He brewed coffee and took it out to the porch, enjoying the still, cool air. His garden was starting to thrive. He'd hired a landscaper after noticing how Ethan loved the flowers at Lily's. Now, small buds of color dotted once barren patches. Richard smiled, thinking about how different his life was now. The workaholic attorney, living in an impersonal mansion, now cared about flowers and got excited about guitar lessons. Who would have guessed? He checked the clock. 8:30. Ethan typically slept until 9 on weekends. That left Richard a little time to review documents for a case. Even with his new routine, he remained a respected lawyer, just one with different priorities. He was absorbed in reading when he heard hurried footsteps inside. Glancing at the clock, he was surprised. 8:40. Ethan was up earlier than usual. The porch door flew open, and Ethan burst out, still in pajamas, hair sticking up every which way, eyes wide with excitement. "Dad!" he nearly shouted, urgency in his voice that made Richard set the paperwork aside immediately. "What is it, champ? Are you okay?" Ethan stood there, breathing hard, an unfamiliar expression on his face, part excitement, part disbelief. "Dad," he repeated, more calmly. "I think my eyesight got better." Richard froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips. "What do you mean?" When I woke up, I could see the dinosaur poster on the wall, the one you put up last month. Before it was just blurry shapes, but today I could actually see the pictures. Richard carefully set his mug down, his hands trembling. He didn't want to give Ethan false hope. The doctor had said retinitis pigmentosa had no cure. His vision might stabilize, but improve. "Did you sleep well?" he asked gently. "Sometimes when we wake up, our eyes can play tricks." "No, Dad, it's different," Ethan insisted, tugging Richard's sleeve. "Come see." Ethan led him inside, up to his room. He pointed at the dinosaur poster, a recent addition to brighten the room, part of Richard's efforts to make it more fun. "Look, I can see that one's a T-Rex, and that one's a Triceratops." Ethan pointed out specific details. Before, it was just blurry. Richard studied his son intently, feeling a mix of hope and caution. It could be just a good vision day. The doctors had explained that Ethan's sight might fluctuate. "Let's do a test, okay?" Richard suggested, trying to stay calm. He grabbed a book from the shelf, one of Ethan's favorites, but with fairly small print. "Can you read the first line?" Ethan held the book at a distance that normally would have been too far. "The little dragon had never flown so high," he read without hesitation, grinning so brightly that Richard's heart ached. "See, Dad, I can read it." Richard swallowed hard. "That's incredible, champ. Can we call Dr. Phillips? I want to tell him." "It's Saturday, son, but we can call his office Monday and—" "Please, Dad." Ethan's eyes sparkled with excitement. "This is important." Richard hesitated only briefly. He still feared it was a temporary improvement, but if there was any chance this was real— "You know what? I'll call his emergency line. We'll see if he can see us today." To Richard's surprise, Dr. Phillips agreed to see them that morning. "It's probably just a fluctuation," the doctor cautioned over the phone, "but let's check it out." Over breakfast, Ethan was too excited to eat. He kept asking, what if Lily was right? Richard looked puzzled. "Right about what?" "She said she'd cure me, remember? That first day at the park." Richard felt a lump in his throat. He remembered it perfectly, the little girl in a yellow dress telling Ethan, "You look sad. I know how to cure you." "Lily's special," Richard answered carefully. "But eye diseases need doctors, champ." Ethan shrugged, a little smile on his lips. "Maybe. But Lily said sometimes you have to learn to see with different eyes, so your real eyes can get better." Richard was touched by the innocent wisdom of that statement. In a way, that was exactly what had happened. Ethan had learned to see the world differently, through stories, sounds, textures, through a friend at Dr. Phillips' office. Richard watched anxiously as the doctor ran a series of tests. Ethan sat patiently in the exam chair, answering questions eagerly. Dr. Phillips maintained a neutral, professional expression. After almost an hour, he asked Richard to step into his office while Ethan waited in the reception area, flipping through a magazine, something he hadn't been able to do a few weeks ago. Inside the cramped office, Dr. Phillips studied the test results. "Well," Richard asked, unable to mask his anxiety, "is it just a normal fluctuation?" The doctor removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose, a gesture Richard had come to recognize as a sign of deep thought. "Mr. Maves, in medicine, we learn to be cautious with any pronouncements, especially in cases like Ethan's." "I understand," Richard said, bracing for disappointment. "But," the doctor continued, "today's tests show something surprising. His condition has stabilized." Richard blinked. "Stabilized? Meaning?" "Meaning it's not getting worse, not at the rate we initially observed." Dr. Phillips shuffled some papers. "When we first diagnosed Ethan, his peripheral vision was deteriorating quickly. Now it seems to have stopped. Is that even possible? I thought retinitis pigmentosa was always progressive." "It is progressive, as yes, but the rate can vary a lot. Sometimes there are periods where the disease doesn't advance, for months, even years. In very rare cases, especially in children, we might see small improvements in central acuity, even if peripheral vision remains compromised." "So he really is seeing better?" Richard's voice cracked on the last word. "According to these tests, yes. There's a slight increase in his central vision. This isn't a cure. The underlying condition is still there. But for now, he's genuinely seeing a bit better than at our last check. Richard gripped the arms of his chair to steady himself as relief, joy, and disbelief washed over him. How is that possible? Dr. Phillips gave a small, kind smile. Medicine doesn't have all the answers, Mr. Maves. We know the human brain is remarkably adaptable, especially in children. Sometimes, if part of the vision is compromised, the brain adjusts, maximizing what's left. He hesitated, observing Richard. If you'll allow me a non-scientific observation, Ethan seems different. The first time I saw him, he was so quiet, withdrawn, almost apathetic. Today he was brimming with stories about playing guitar, about Lily, about picnics in the park. Richard nodded, at a loss for words. Emotional well-being has a profound impact on how we cope with any medical condition, the doctor went on. I'm not saying happiness cures organic diseases, but it can definitely help the body use its resources better. What does this mean for his future? Richard asked, finally finding his voice. We continue treatment and therapy. Keep monitoring him closely. I can't promise this stabilization is permanent, but for now, Dr. Phillips smiled again. For now, let's celebrate the good news. Returning to the waiting room, Richard found Ethan hopping off his chair. So, was I right? Can I see better? He asked, eyes full of anticipation. Richard exchanged a glance with the doctor, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, champ. The doctor confirms your condition has stabilized. You really are seeing a bit better. Ethan's face lit up with a smile so bright that Richard had to quickly turn away, pretending to organize some papers. He didn't want his son to see the tears threatening to spill. Outwardly, he maintained composure, a small smile, a steady hand on Ethan's shoulder. But inside, Richard was sobbing with relief, gratitude, and a hope he hadn't dared name before now. During the drive home, Ethan pointed excitedly at everything he could see more clearly: road signs, billboards, birds in the sky. Can I tell Lily? He blurted, practically bouncing in his seat. She has to know. Of course. Want me to call her parents now? No! Ethan looked horrified. I want to tell her in person. Can we have a picnic tomorrow at the park, like we used to, with Lily? Richard chuckled. Sure, champ. I can play guitar for her. I learned that new song, remember? I remember. I'm sure she'll love it. As soon as they got home, Richard called Mark while Ethan went off to practice his guitar. They planned a picnic for the next day. Is something up? Mark asked, noting the excitement in Richard's voice. Good news, Richard answered, still in disbelief. Ethan will tell you tomorrow. That night, Richard could hardly sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Dr. Phillips saying, "It's stabilized." Simple words that meant the world. He knew it wasn't a cure. Retinitis pigmentosa was still there, still threatened Ethan's vision. But for the first time since the diagnosis, there was real hope, a small miracle. And Richard knew exactly whom to thank for that miracle. Sunday dawned bright and warm, the perfect day for a picnic. Ethan was up early, carefully packing his guitar and helping prepare sandwiches. Richard watched, touched by how confidently Ethan moved around the kitchen, such a contrast from a few months ago. Think they'll be late? Ethan asked for the third time, peering out the window. We said noon and it's only 11. Richard laughed at his son's impatience. When they arrived at the park, the Thompsons were already there, spreading a checkered cloth under the same tree where the kids used to play. Lily ran to greet Ethan as soon as she saw him. I have a surprise for you, she announced, holding a small box decorated with colorful stickers. I have a surprise too, Ethan replied, nearly bursting with excitement. Richard and Mark shared amused looks as they set out the food. Sandra had brought a chocolate cake, Ethan's favorite, plus sandwiches and fresh fruit. The picnic was simple but perfect. After they ate, Ethan couldn't hold back any longer. He asked for everyone's attention and told them about the doctor's findings, demonstrating how he could read things from a distance that used to be impossible. I knew it, Lily cheered, clapping her hands. I told you I'd cure you. The adults laughed, but something in Lily's absolute confidence made Richard's heart flutter. In a way, Lily really had cured Ethan, not of his physical condition, but of the sadness and isolation that had consumed him. While the kids ran off to play, the adults remained under the tree, chatting. Over the last few months, Richard had gotten closer to Mark and Sandra than he ever thought possible. They were so different backgrounds, educations, lifestyles, but bound by something stronger, love for their children. "Ethan is like a different boy," Sandra remarked, watching him chase after Lily. The first time Lily met him, he hardly said a word. Now look at him. It was true. Ethan ran and jumped, full of confidence few would have believed possible just a short time ago. "All thanks to Lily," Richard said. Sandra smiled, but there was a trace of worry in her eyes, something Richard noticed immediately. "Is everything all right?" he asked gently. Sandra hesitated, exchanging a look with Mark, who nodded encouragingly. "We've been thinking about the future, about Lily's education," she began. "The school she's at does its best, but their resources are limited. We've always dreamed of sending her somewhere better." Richard listened closely. With Mark's new job and Sandra's growing cake business, they could consider a private school for Lily, but it would still be tough financially. "Lily's so bright," Sandra continued. "She loves science, she's always doing little experiments at home. And the way she understands people, how she understood Ethan from day one, she deserves every opportunity." Richard thought of the little girl who had changed his family's life, who taught Ethan to see with more than his eyes, who chased away his loneliness with a single smile. "We'll make it happen," he said, a surge of determination filling him. "She's too special." Mark frowned. "What do you mean?" "The St. Luke Academy," Richard replied. "That's where Ethan goes. They have an incredible science program, dedicated teachers. Lily would fit right in." "Richard," Sandra interjected gently, "we appreciate it, but St. Luke is way out of our budget. Even with our new income, the tuition—" "I'm not offering to pay," Richard clarified quickly, guessing their worry. "I'm on the school board. I can help her apply for a scholarship. They have a program for exceptional students, and Lily definitely qualifies." Mark and Sandra stared at him in surprise. "That would be amazing," Sandra admitted, "but we don't want to take advantage of our friendship." "It's not taking advantage," Richard insisted. "It's recognizing talent. Lily would earn it on her own merits. And honestly," he glanced at the kids, now hunched over something near the lake, "it would also be good for Ethan to have Lily around." Their conversation paused when Ethan hollered for them to come see a family of ducklings near the water. The group got up to watch the small ducks swim in line behind their mother. Richard marveled at Ethan's enthusiasm as he pointed them out to Lily, explaining how they followed the mother in a single file. He thought about how life could change in an instant. A few months ago, he'd heard the worst possible news, a diagnosis that meant his son might lose his sight forever. Now they were celebrating not just an unexpected stabilization, but also a deeper transformation. Ethan had found his voice, his confidence, his joy. And it all began with a young girl in a yellow dress who approached a sad little boy in a sandbox and said, "I know how to cure you." Maybe the biggest cure wasn't for Ethan's eyes, Richard thought, but for his heart, and, in a way, for Richard's as well. The first day of school after summer break felt special that year. Richard parked a short distance from the main gate, watching families saying goodbye to children clad in crisp uniforms, colorful backpacks in tow, faces lit with excitement or nerves. He straightened his tie. He had an important hearing later, but nothing would make him miss this moment. In the back seat, Ethan fussed with his new uniform, glancing repeatedly out the window. "Do you think Lily's here already?" he asked for the third time in 5 minutes. "They're probably on their way," Richard said, checking the time. Mark said they'd leave home at 7:30. As if on cue, a familiar car pulled up a few spots away. Mark got out from the driver's side while Sandra opened the back door. Then Lily stepped out, wearing the same uniform as Ethan, her braids decorated with blue ribbons that matched the school emblem. "There she is," Ethan exclaimed, already undoing his seatbelt. When the two families met on the sidewalk, the children immediately stuck to each other like magnets. "Do you like your uniform?" Lily asked, twirling to show hers off. "It's comfy," Ethan answered. "And look, our badges match." "We're in the same class," Lily said with great authority. "We'll study together every day now." Sandra adjusted Lily's backpack. "Remember what we talked about, if you need anything." "I know, Mom," Lily said patiently. "Talk to the teacher." The adults exchanged smiles. Even in a brand new setting, Lily's confidence remained unshakable. "Ready, champ?" Richard asked, crouching to Ethan's level. The boy nodded, his eyes shining behind new glasses, an extra precaution recommended by Dr. Phillips, even though his vision had stabilized. "I'm ready," Ethan said, and as if sensing the emotion on his father's face, he added, "Don't worry, Dad. Lily will be with me." Richard swallowed hard and smiled. "I know you'll both do great." The bell rang, signaling that all students should head in. For a brief second, Richard saw hesitation flicker over Ethan's features, a shadow of his old timidity. Then Lily held out her hand. "Shall we go together?" she asked. Ethan returned her smile and took her hand. "Together." The four adults watched as Ethan and Lily walked to the gate, hands clasped, bright smiles, steps in perfect unison. There was no fear, no uncertainty in their posture, only excitement and confidence. "Feels like just yesterday that I saw them playing in the sandbox for the first time," Sandra said, voice thick with emotion. Richard nodded, words failing him. He watched his son, so self-assured now, heading toward a new chapter of life. The quiet, forlorn boy had been replaced by a vibrant, fearless child. At the school entrance, the kids turned back to wave. Richard raised his hand, overwhelmed by a tidal wave of feelings he could barely process. In that moment, he realized he'd accomplished something far beyond any legal battle he'd ever won, beyond any court victory or high-paying client. He had helped his son find his way. He had learned to be a father, not in name only, but in heart and soul. Mark placed a hand on Richard's shoulder. "They're going to be fine." "I know," Richard replied, regaining his voice at last. "They have each other." That night, after hearing all about their first day, new friends, new adventures, Richard tucked Ethan in as usual. But something in the air felt different, as though a chapter had closed. "Did you like your first day?" Richard asked, perched on the edge of the bed. "It was the best day," Ethan said, fighting a yawn. "Lily showed me around because of the visit we did before. And Dad, there's a huge library, bigger than any I've seen." Richard grinned. "That sounds amazing." "It is." Ethan yawned again, then suddenly sat up and threw his arms around Richard. "I love you, Dad." Those simple words rocked Richard to his core. He pulled Ethan close, feeling his small heart beating against his own. Tears sprang to his eyes as he savored that precious moment. "I love you more than anything, son," he whispered, voice quavering with emotion. "More than everything." Ethan smiled sleepily, curled up, and was soon dozing off with his worn teddy bear in his arms. Richard stayed, watching his son's peaceful face, thinking about the journey they'd taken. He'd started as a single father, physically present but distant in every other way, a man who provided everything but the one thing Ethan truly needed. Now, listening to Ethan's quiet breaths and the soft rustle of sheets, Richard knew something fundamental had changed. He was no longer just a single father, he was a whole father. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.